As the chaos of the end of Kali Yuga increases, it becomes an urgent matter not to be contaminated by psychic contagion, by the vibrations of anxiety, confusion, aggressivity, terror, and all the other brew of negative emotions that can easily take over one's mind and cause one to create very unfortunate karma. In order to be immune to the psychic contagion, one must have freed oneself completely from the monkey mind. There must be zero tolerance for mental chatter. It is only when the mind is free of chatter that one will receive the coherent signal of the presence of the oneself. And along with receiving its signal, its clarity and lucidity, one will receive the power to remain at peace and to transmit peace. So there must be zero tolerance for leaving the 0 point. It is far more important to not leave the 0 point than to not leave the ashram. It is extremely important to remain in psychological union with the Supreme Being. So that whatever psychological residues of the ego are not allowed to be activated through the influence of the environment or the subtle fantasies that remain in the subconscious mind. This is the time to gain mastery over the ego mind. And this requires constant vigilance and refusal to be deceived by the ego mind. Don't let it take you for a ride, because it will not only throw into your mind irrational thoughts, but it will also bring uncontrollable impulses for lower chakra acting out. It will bring anxiety into the mind. It will bring every kind of unfortunate, destructive, emotional tendencies. And it will bring in projections about other people that are projections from one's own ego's shadow that can cause karmic situations to arise that produce conflicts, that create schisms, and that produce results that bring disharmony to others as well as oneself. To avoid that, one must remain in the silent, luminous awareness of the ground consciousness from which thought derives. And with the power of the awakened buddhi and its discernment, to be able to distinguish an ego thought from an idea that comes from the real self. This can only be discerned once one has a baseline of silent presence in which the vibrational frequency of Shiva is clearly felt, recognized, and absorbed. It is through this holy communion between the individual relative self and the absolute self that the relative is subsumed into the absolute and functions therefore thenceforward as an instrument of the absolute rather than a rogue element of individual consciousness. It is only when the internal communion is complete that the external community can also abide as a holy communion. Through the silent presence, the vibrational field of Brahman that pervades, encompasses, underlies, and shines through the entire world, is perceived as a unified field. And that field transmits a single note, a single frequency that will unite all of those who are in union with the ground of being, and will enable us to operate as a superorganism and to function with precognitive intuition as to how to act to prevent unfortunate karma from appearing, and to create optimal circumstances for the healing of all beings who will, in their own lostness, turn to that highest frequency of coherence that it is our duty to transmit, so that all become gradually connected into a single network, a single internet of the noosphere of the planet, a single consciousness that can connect all beings who will soon be searching for that source that can bring salvation and liberation. We must create a collective transmitter that is strong enough to disseminate the signal without interference throughout the planetary grid of consciousness. And to do that, we must be free of any internal glitches. We must not indulge in the luxury of falling into the ego. We must not allow it to create more karma. We are in the time now of liberation from karma. And you must understand that every ego thought creates more karma. More attachment to the body, more attachment to the bodies of others, more sense of need and appetite for the enjoyment of the physical, more desire to be touched and held and contained by another because we cannot contain ourselves, our own impulses, and we must be free of any disturbance from the outer world by being encased in a luminous auric field that prevents negative vibrations from entering. This field can only be created and sustained when the mind is silent and focused on the 0 point and emanating its luminous power unconditionally as love to all beings. So we must move from ego to Atman and remain established in that state. And in that state of realization of the self, you will be fearless, wise, compassionate, and accurate. The age of the ego is over. That level of consciousness is now obsolete. It is exhausted, and it is incapable of serving in this time of need. Do not indulge in the sentimentality of the ego. Remain fiercely united with the supreme power. Become a spiritual warrior who is impeccable. And claim the throne of spiritual royalty. Generously sharing your peace, your divine love, your light, and your silence. As the power of silence grows in the community, the radiance of its emanation of light will become palpable. And this is the true immune system that God has designed for us against all kinds of negativities, all kinds of illusions, all shadows of the lower mind. We must claim our freedom from the ego. And emerge as the infinite consciousness that we are eternally. And bring that eternal presence into the field of time, so that time itself can die and be reborn like the phoenix. But every ego must be sacrificed into the flame of God's eternal light for this to be accomplished. Every yogi must achieve the union to which we aspire and not put it off to the future. Liberation can only occur in the now. The now is itself presence, silence, and the awareness that all is the one supreme self. Let there be no illusion of duality or separation. Let there be no illusion of being a human person or even of a soul seeking God, but of the oneself who is always already that, here and now. Liberation is the silence in which the ego dies and the real self is born. May this immaculate conception and birth be your experience in this historic moment of the return of the Avatar.